And we're ready to go.
All right, let's go.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Because my voice has suddenly become better as I've been out for the last couple of weeks doing talks. I was doing a lot of Zoom talks, but I'm back in person. My name is Weiner. I've been doing this type of thing since 1971, starting at Spring Valley High School in Rockland County as an 11th grader, doing a high school show called Tiger Talk on WRKL radio. And then I also worked for the Bergen Record and the Nyack Journal News at the same time. And how many of you remember WNEW radio, 1130 on your dial, with William B. Williams, right? And so I'm 21 years old. This is March of 1978. And I'm working for WGRC, which was a station in Rockland County. And it's a Friday afternoon, and my boss, Steve North, whose father actually worked for Johnny Carson briefly, says to me, the Democrats are holding a statewide fundraiser tomorrow in Nyack, and why don't you go there and yeah, just find something to do and report on it on Monday. So I go there, and all the Democrats of the day, Mario Cuomo and Hugh Carey, are walking in, along with a very young guy by the name of Jerome Nadler. Ever hear of him? Jerome Nadler, very young guy at that point. And there's this big, tall guy, good-looking guy. He comes right to me, and he says, "I'd like you." And it's like, we haven't even met. And he says, "I want to tell you something." I knew who he was because I watched Batman, and he was Mayor Lindsay of Gotham City. And he says, so I want to tell you something. I said, "What's that?" He says, "I'm running for Senate, state of New York, and I like you, so I want to tell you before I tell everybody else." I said, "Okay," and he's drunk. And I said, "Okay, so let me put my tape recorder on and talk into my mic." And he does, and I go back to my 500-watt station, file the report, file it with UPI and AP, and I get a call from WNEW radio in New York. 21 years old. I know the station exists, but I never listened to it because they got Sinatra and Nat King Cole and all those people. And yeah, I'm 21. I'm not listening to Frank Sinatra at 21. And so I get a call from WNEW, Henry Marcotte, and he says, "Can you do that report for us?" I said, "Sure. How much are you going to pay me?" $10. $10 sold. And 21 years old, I started my career on big-time New York radio on WNEW, and I've gone on since then. But we're talking about Jewish athletes and promoters today. And anybody know who that guy is? No, you should. His name is Lippmann Pike, and he was the first professionally paid, over-the-table baseball player in 1868 with the Philadelphia team. And he led the world in home runs in 1868. Forbes Field, Pittsburgh. The only thing that is left from Forbes Field, which is on the University of Pittsburgh grounds, is that wall. The reason I'm there is because Barney Dreyfus built the first non-wooden stadium in the United States, and is also the father of the World Series. Barney Dreyfus was the owner of the Pittsburgh Pirates back when the World Series started in 1903, and when that was opened up in 1909. Years ago, I did this talk years ago for, it's over in West Orange, the place in West Orange, I guess that's a JCC in West Orange. And they asked me, "Can you do a talk on Jews in sports?" And this was 1999. So I was talking to my friend. He says, "Well, what are you going to do after you get by Hank Greenberg and Sandy Koufax?" And I said, "I'll show you." Well, that's Hank Greenberg. Odd thing about that Hank Greenberg and that place was there was a guy who was probably in his late 80s at that time. This is 1999. And he's sitting in the back, and he's in a wheelchair. And he says, "I knew Hank. I went to James Monroe High School," which my mother-in-law did as well. And she was 10 years after Hank. And he said, "Hank he was the biggest kid there, and we used to go in the outfield and chase the balls that he used to hit and throw them back." And he said, "Hank, the other thing with Hank was when the Irish kids came into the neighborhood and wanted to beat us up, when the Italian kids came into the neighborhood and wanted to beat us up, we'd get Hank, he'd take off his shirt, and they'd run the other way. Hank was 6'3", 6'4", and chiseled. He was the biggest kid in James Monroe High School. I worked with Marty Glickman at his broadcasting school in the late 1980s. He still owes me money. I figure I'll get it in the next lifetime. Fastest kid in Brooklyn. Fastest kid in Brooklyn. To his right's a guy by the name of Sam Stoller. Do you know who Sam was? Sam ran the Milrose games. That's where I knew him from. But Sam and Marty did not compete in the 1936 Olympics. Here's an oddity in my life. I worked with Marty, knew Sam, and interviewed this woman, Gretel Bergman. Did you ever hear of Gretel Bergman? Well, she was Hitler's pawn. And she was the best athlete going into the Olympics, woman athlete going into the 1936 Olympics, Hitler's pawn. And I interviewed her about that. Sandy, well, everybody here has heard the same. You got this big smile on your face with Sandy. I did a talk on Long Island, and this woman said to me, oh, I've known Sandy since he's 4 years old. I knew him when he was Sandy Braun, before his mother got married, and he took the name Koufax. I said, how'd you know him? We lived in the same building in Brooklyn. Sid Lakman. Sid Lakman played at Columbia University, played with the Chicago Bears. And getting into radio and TV, David Sarnoff. David Sarnoff is the guy who founded NBC Radio, NBC TV, and there's a lot of stuff about him, how he came up with the idea of radio after the sinking of the Titanic. And he was working at Wanamaker's department store with the Marconi radio or wireless at the time, and figured out, hey, after I got all the names of the survivors and deceased on the Titanic, we could actually do something and start radio. And that's his story, General David Sarnoff, but he's important in sports as well. But let's talk about Lippmann Pike. Because in July 1866, Lippmann Pike hit 6 home runs in a single game. Now, it's not the game that you know today. In fact, Jim Boughton, before he passed away, we spoke at Yogi Berra's museum in 2007. Only time that we crisscrossed, although we knew each other rather well, only time we were at the same program the same day. And he talked about the games from the 1860s, and players used to call their pitches, and the pitcher was 50 feet away, not 60 feet away, and the player would tell the pitcher that's where he wanted to hit it. But that was Major League home run record at the time. Less than a handful of players since then have hit as many as 4 home runs in a game. And he was a great home run hitter. He was prolific. So much so that he was the first baseball player to get paid over the table. In 1872, Lippy hit 17.2% of the home runs in his league, a number not bested until 1920, when Babe Ruth hit 20%, or almost 21% of the home runs in the American League. And you never heard of Lippmann Pike? He was Hank Greenberg before he was Hank Greenberg. The last double-digit home run of the league was in 1938, when Hank Greenberg hit 10% of all the home runs in the American League. So next to Babe Ruth, Lippy Pike has the second highest batter-to-league home run percentage. And he did it when baseballs weren't made of the stuff they were made today. In 1871, the National Association begins operations. And he plays for a short time in captains, which really is the manager. So he is the first Jewish manager, the Troy, New York Haymakers. In those days, the captain was the field manager. So he was the first Jewish manager in baseball. And the first over-the-table paid baseball player. He was the first American Jew to gain national fame as a sports icon. First Jewish baseball player, first Jewish manager, first Jewish umpire, and yet he's not in the Hall of Fame. Nobody ever takes up his case. Why? I don't know, but nobody takes up his case. Oh, by the way, many years ago, I don't know how many of you lived ever out Long Island. Anybody live on Long Island? Okay, there was a newspaper called Newsday, which I wrote op-ed pieces for in the early part of the century. 21st century. There was a guy named Steve Jacobson. And one day he's a writer for Newsday, and he comes up to me and he's looking at the all-Nassau County football team. And he's saying, you know, it's the Jewish women's fault. The Jewish women's fault. There are no kids who are Jewish on the team. He said they want their kids to be lawyers and doctors. They don't want their kids to play baseball or football. Lippmann Pike. His mother doesn't approve of him playing baseball, or his brothers. Jewish boys should be paying attention to more sensible matters. Baseball became a big part of everybody growing up in Brooklyn during the 1850s, who were boys. And there were three Pike brothers, Boaz, Lippy, and they both played for the Brooklyn Atlantics, and his brother, either Isidore or Jay Pike. Is it Israel Pike? Is it Jay Pike? Or is it J.E. Pike? Nobody ever figured it out, but they knew he was one of the Pike brothers. On August 27, 1877, Israel Pike appeared in one game for the Brooklyn Hartfords of the National League. It was the only time that Lippmann and his brother Israel, or J.E. Pike, played together in the major leagues. Now, Barney Dreyfus. Anybody here ever hear of Barney Dreyfus? Well, Barney Dreyfus is the father of the modern World Series. This is the plaque that's at the University of Pittsburgh, next to the whatever's left of Forbes Field. Barney Dreyfus, owner of the Pittsburgh Pirates, 1900 through 1932, legendary baseball leader, influential in initiating the first modern World Series, 1903. He led the Pirates to 6 National League and 2 World Series titles and was vital to building Forbes Field here in 1909. Around 1888, Barney Dreyfus was convinced that baseball, as a business, had the potential of enormous profit. And you might be hearing today, listening to what's going on between the players and the owners in the 2022 baseball lockout, that baseball does have the potential for enormous profit. In fact, the Atlanta Braves baseball team had something like a $60 million profit from last year on revenues of about nearly $600 million. So Barney's talking to his cousins, hey, listen, I think I got a business proposition for you. Why don't you sit down, we'll bring some challah and we'll figure this out, right? So he talks to his cousins, and his cousins say, yeah, we'll do it, we'll do it, we'll do it. And he also joins with some of the local distillers in Louisville, and they invest in the Louisville Colonels of the American Association. In 1892, he puts more money into the Louisville Colonels. And in 1899, he buys half of the Pittsburgh Pirates, and decides, I got a piece of the Pirates, I got a piece of Louisville, I'm going to send my best players to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's a bigger market, better market. Louisville is a Ohio River market, and was okay, but Pittsburgh had steel mills, coal mines, and other things. And he builds his stadium in 1909. The upstart American League challenged the National League of Baseball's claim of being the only major league. Dreyfus brokers a deal, peace deal, and he challenges the Boston Americans, or the Boston Pilgrims, you know them better today as the Red Sox, to a best-of-9 series, the pennant winners of each league, October 1903. He is the father of the modern World Series. Did you know that? A Jew came up with the World Series. He's looking for a stadium. He's looking for a fireproof stadium. So he invests about $2 million, which today would be $50 million or so, and he builds a stadium called Forbes Field, named after the British general who captured Fort Duquesne from the French army and renamed it Fort Pitt in 1758. You got to remember, Forbes. Hey, we were all Brits in 1758. Remember that? Anyway, Forbes Field opened for the first time. June 30th, 1909, a game against the Chicago Cubs. It would last until 1970. And finally, he gets a Hall of Fame plaque. for years and years and years. They're pushing him for the Hall of Fame, and finally, about 10 years ago, he's admitted to the Baseball Hall of Fame. Actually, it's more than that. It's 14 years ago now. He was named to the Honor Rolls of Baseball in 1946, into the Hall of Fame in 2008, following his election by the Veterans Committee. It only took 76 years after his death. John Jay Mcgraw and the Jewish Babe Ruth. Any old New York Giants baseball fans in here? You were? Do you know that's a team that actively sought a Jewish star? Actively sought. Think of some of the players. You ever see Sid Corbin? What was he? Jewish. Andy Cohen? Jewish. McGraw was always looking for the Jewish Babe Ruth. McGraw looked at the immigration patterns of Lower Manhattan. And how many of you emanated from Lower Manhattan, like me? How many of your families came in to Ellis Island, settled on the Lower East Side?
Brooklyn.
Brooklyn. They went right to Brooklyn or the Lower East Side beforehand? Well, anyway, he's looking at the Lower East Side. You got to remember, this guy was the manager back in 1904, 1905, and he's looking at the enormous population of the Lower East Side, and he knows 85 to 90% of that population is Jewish, and he wants a part of it to come to the Polo Grounds. So he's always looking for the next Jewish player, the great Jewish player. In a July 23rd column for the New York Evening World, John McGraw discussed his quest for a Jewish hero, and for reasons for doing so. Today, I would give $100,000 for a Jewish player who even had the prospect of becoming a real star. It is not generally known, but I've had scouts looking for this man for the past 5 years. I have scoured the country without success, but I still have hope. I've tried a number of candidates. In fact, I'm working with a youngster now. That youngster would be Moses, the rabbi of Swat Solomon. I'll talk about him in a couple of minutes. And there is McGraw. I have several reasons for wanting one. The main being that I have never yet seen a Jewish player who is not unusually ambitious. Jewish players are never mediocre. As soon as they realize they can never reach the top, they usually withdraw from the game and go into some other profession where they felt there was a better chance of that goal. Sounds like a Jewish mother, doesn't it? Doesn't it? Another reason is that 50% of the patrons of baseball, especially in New York, are Jewish. And for years, they have been hoping for one of their fate to be a member of the Giants. That is but natural. The failure to develop one, though, has never dampened their enthusiasm for the game, not in the least. Jewish people have always been great lovers of sport, as far back as the days described by General Lew Wallace of Ben-Hur. They've developed gladiators, boxers, wrestlers, football players, golfers. It's odd to see so comparatively few in big league baseball. Well, boxers, Benny Leonard, Lou Tendler. Can you imagine what influence it would have on our game if two Jewish ball players rivaling each other as Benny Leonard, the ghetto wizard, and light heavyweight boxing champion, 1917 to 25, and Lou Tendler, whom he fought in 2 great fights, rivaling each other in boxing? There's always been some sort of racial rivalry between the Irish, the French, the Indians, the Germans, the Cubans, the Poles, for superiority in baseball. The Reds, for instance, boast a team of all nationalities. With the Jews taking an active part in such athletic rivalry, baseball would be indeed the great melting pot of sport. Talked about Johnny Kling, infielder with the Chicago Cubs. The greatest Jews in baseball in McGraw's time. The greatest catcher next to Roger Bresnahan, who was with the Giants, that I have known during my active years as manager was Johnny Kling. Johnny's a Jew. But so great was he as catcher for the Cubs that many never thought to inquire as his religious or faith. Another comer is Sammy Bone of the Reds, Sammy Ike Samuels of the St. Louis Club, as was Ed Stein. Right now, Bowen is the only Jew I can recall in either major league. Baseball player? Be a lawyer. Be a doctor. Call your Bubba, tell her I'm going to be a baseball player? No. The mothers are to blame. Steve Jacobson and John Jay Mcgraw. The reason I could give for the scarcity of Jewish players is the great care the parents exercise over their boys for business or professional careers. How many Jewish mothers are here that said, go become a doctor or a lawyer? Or a business? You? Yeah? Did they become doctors and lawyers? They did become doctors and lawyers? So he was right. So Mcgraw was right, wasn't he? Many of them develop unusual athletic ability at college and undoubtedly would become star players. The parents, though, influenced them not to let anything interfere with their mental training for the future. Were you one of those mothers saying you better work at your school book? Any of you one of those mothers who said study, study, study? Sure, sure. Steve Jacobson, it's the mother's fault. Moses, the rabbi of SWAT, Solomon. This was going to be John J. McGraw's Babe Ruth. Babe Ruth. Yeah, he was the Sultan of SWAT. And there's a old baseball term called swatting, which means you swatted at the ball and missed. And he was really good at that. Moses Solomon. John J. McGraw purchased his contract from the Hutchinson, Kansas Wheat Shockers. He was hitting .421 with 49 home runs. The New York press dubbed Moses Solomon the Rabbi of SWAT, the Jewish Babe Ruth. In 8 at-bats for the Giants in the late 1923 season, he had 3 hits. But he was a liability in the field and never appeared in another major league game. But his lifetime batting average was .375. And his slugging percentage was .500. And he ended up retiring, guess where? Miami. That's where he went. Probably went to the Fontainebleau Hotel and watched Myron Cohen. Maybe he watched Myron Cohen. Yeah. He lived on New Hempstead Road. I interviewed him once, went to his house. He opens the door, he's in his bathrobe. That's it, he's in his bathrobe. What are you doing here? We're supposed to do an interview. All right, sit down. He never changed out of his bathrobe. That's my last impression of Myron Cohen. Anyway, Solomon had whacked more home runs in a year at Hutchinson than he did the rest of his combined baseball career. He quit in 1930, and he became a real estate agent. And the home run king passed away in Miami. Of course, Miami, right? Missed the Gleason show. Jackie Gleason show didn't start till, no, actually it started, 64 down there. June 25th, 1965. But McGraw and the Giants were always looking for the next one. And the next one is Andy Cohen. Andy Cohen was an infielder, and check this out. The Sporting News said of him, he had all the natural characteristics of his race. Thick, dark hair, dark skin, and keen mentality. Smart, right? Keen mentality, smart. The Giants played on his success on the field with vendors selling ice cream cones at concession stands at the Polo Grounds. With the slot filled by Rogers Hornsby, who was one of the great hitters of all the time on the Giants, Cohen spent the 1927 season in Buffalo, batting .353, and the team won the title. He was warmly welcomed by Buffalo's Jewish community, which had an Andy Cohen Day, and he was given gifts, including a diamond ring from fans and a black onyx ring from a jewelry store, among other gifts. And he makes it to the Giants in 1928. Hornsby played 155 games with the Giants in 27. He's traded to Boston, the Braves, and Cohen gets the spot. And he has a pretty good year, rookie year, 1928. It's .274, 24 doubles, 7 triples, and 9 home runs. And he's 4th in double plays, turned by second baseman that year. But he plays his last game in 1929. Now I brought up Myron Cohen for a reason, because he wasn't the only Cohen that used Cohen as part of a vaudeville showbiz routine. Cohen and Hogan, or was it Hogan and Cohen? formed a comedy team. Ever hear of Hogan and Cohn? Well, they went on the vaudeville circuit and made some money. As part of the vaudeville act, they would tell jokes and sing parodies with Shanty Hogan, an Irish teammate from the Giants who was catcher for the team. After the 1928 season, they got onto the Low circuit. That's a pretty good circuit on the vaudeville stage, the Low circuit. Their first appearance was at the Lowe's Commodore Theater in Manhattan on October 25th, 1928. They earned $1,800 a week, $900 each. And they were billed as Cohen and Hogan, except in Boston, Irish of course, they were Hogan and Cohn. In the 1960 interview, Cohn reminisced, "If we didn't kill vaudeville, we sure helped." Yeah, hey, look, he hadn't lost his gift, right, to tell the jokes. The one who got away. John Jay Mcgraw missed this one. The Giants missed that one. How could they miss that one unless they never went to the Bronx? Maybe they just say, we'll stay in Manhattan. We don't want to go to the Bronx. It's hard to get to the Bronx if you think of it. Well, I guess you could go over one of the bridges, but if you took the subway, you had to go down to literally Manhattan to go back up to the Bronx, right?
Oh, you didn't?
No.
No,
There was one stop.
There was a shuttle? I don't know why you didn't take the shuttle then.
There was one stop away from Yankee Stadium, Polo Grounds.
Yeah, I know. Was there a shuttle between the two?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well,
I still don't understand why they didn't take the shuttle. Then he could have gotten the 4 train, right? Could have gotten, Anyway, he gets away. David Greenberg moved his family from Greenwich Village to the Bronx. When I was on the Lower East Side as a kid, we used to refer, this is in late 50s, early 60s, the Bronx. They had money up in the Bronx. That's the way we looked at it. So I guess they had money. They moved from Greenwich Village to the Bronx, across the street from the municipal baseball fields of Crotona Park. Young Henry Greenberg, Hank Greenberg, fell in love with the game. He'd spend hours hitting the ball in the park and getting the neighborhood kids to shag for him. Like that guy who told me back 25 years ago or so, or 23 years ago, that he used to go out there and chase the balls, had Hank Greenberg hit. At James Monroe High School, and this would be the late 20s, because he was born in 1911, he was the star basketball player. And his best sport was basketball, which made sense because it was the ghetto game. You didn't need the ghetto game for Jews. You didn't need any equipment. All you needed was basically the city to put up a basketball hoop and your sneakers, and you had a ball, and that's all you needed. Didn't need anything else. He excelled at soccer, track and field. He wasn't a fan of football, but he tried out just to prove he could play it, and wound up catching a touchdown pass in James Monroe's final game of the season. The Yankees wanted him, which is kind of interesting when you think of it, because the Yankees were always known as an anti-Semitic organization until Michael Burke and CBS got the team. Although all those years they had Mel Allen Israel. Remember Mel Allen Israel? Yeah. Mel Allen and his brother Larry Allen, but it was Larry Israel. And they had a guy by the name of Bob Fischel, who was their PR guy, who took me out to dinner many years ago when we talked about that. But the Yankees wanted him, and they thought he was going to be great. And they took him out to a game, and he looks at who's at first base, and he sees Lou Gehrig. And Gehrig decided, Greenberg says, I don't think playing in the Bronx is for me. I'll never play. Washington wanted him. Pirates, Barney Dreyfus wanted him. The Yankees sent a scout by the name of Paul Critchell to take him to the game. And Greenberg looked at Gehrig and said, he's great. And Critchell said, he's washed up. In a few years, you'll be the Yankee first baseman. I guess he wasn't washed up until he got ALS around 37, 38. And Greenberg would sign with the Detroit Tigers in 1929. He's in Raleigh-Durham, or Raleigh, North Carolina, in 1930. And during batting practice, a pitcher by the name of Phil Page reportedly called Greenberg a goddamn Jew after Greenberg lined a pitch that struck Page in the knee. But other teammates like Schoolboy Rowe and Billy Rogo said to him, go out, outplay the bastards. Just do that. And he would take his place among the elites. And there is Garrett, and there's the Babe, and Greenberg's there along with Mickey Cochran. 1934, that's Greenberg's breakout year in Detroit. Under the new manager, playing manager, the catcher Mickey Cochran, Detroit wins its first pennant since 1909. Greenberg would have 63 doubles. Nobody gets 63 doubles these days. 26 home runs, 139 runs batted in, hit .339, and he was a feared slugger. That the lineup that included Charlie Gehringer and Goose Goslin. Oh, one other thing that Detroit did for him, he always had another Jew on his team. Why? Simple. They wanted him to feel at home. They thought if he had a Jew, or whether it's Harry Eisenstadt or somebody else, at least he'd have somebody to talk to. The High Holy Days. Well, the High Holy Days are a problem. I don't know if anybody have you ever seen Aviva Klemper's The Life and Times of Hank Greenberg. It was on PBS. Aviva is somebody I know, and she's working on something else right now. And she did the PBS special and then came up with the outtakes for another DVD. And she grew up in Detroit, and she said Hank Greenberg was the absolute hero of the Detroit Jewish community. You couldn't get bigger than Hank. Greenberg was faced with a dilemma, whether or not to play Rosh Hashanah of 1934, September 10th, or 38 rather. Greenberg had hesitated to play baseball on the Sabbath, but the High Holy, didn't hesitate to play baseball, he played on Sabbaths. High Holy Days, that's another matter. 1933, he abstained from playing on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and I know his son Steve, and he said he was a secular Jew. But out of respect for the holidays, he didn't want to play on the High Holy Days. After much reflection, even consulting a rabbi who told him, well, the little kids go out and they play, so make believe they're a little kid, because the rabbi was a Detroit Tigers fan. He decided to play the game that day. It's one of the defining moments of his career. He homered twice, Tigers win 2-1. 10 days later, in 1934, the pennant's all but wrapped up. And Greenberg said, I don't have to play in Yom Kippur, and he doesn't. Greenberg, sure there was pressure of being Jewish. How the hell can you get up to home plate every day and have some son of a bitch call you a Jewish bastard, a kike, and a sheenie, and get on your ass without feeling the pressure? If the ball players weren't doing it, the fans were. I used to be frustrated as hell. Sometimes I wanted to go up in the stands and beat the shit out of them. My friend Shelley Salton, whose Uncle Milty played on the Boston Braves. Shelley, you can't hear me now, so put down the burner phone. Shelley is another, Shelley should be in this actually. He promoted the Billie Jean King, Bobby Riggs television spectacular. Anyway, he said that his Uncle Milty was injured, and he was working out before a game, and he was allowed to work out in Fenway Park, and Detroit came in. And he says that he's there, you know, with the Tallis and Langsfillen and all that other stuff, and Greenberg walks in. He says, what the hell are you doing? He said, I know what you're doing. Don't do it in the clubhouse. Do somewhere else. And here's the reason. We got Virgil Trucks on this team. And we got Dizzy Trout on our team. They're both from Alabama, and they're going to say something for you. And I'm going to have to go, and I'm going to have to beat them up. So I don't want to do that. So do me a favor, put it away. And Shelley's uncle saying, but I promised my mother, I promised my mother, she said I could play Major League Baseball, but I have to lay still. Same guy, we got married, Boston Braves Park. Between games of the Boston Braves doubleheader, he's on the team, and they put a cup out in the pitcher's mat, and all the Braves had their bats like that, and they walked right up there, and the rabbi did the ceremony. So anyway, that's according to Shelley. And then there's the Babe Ruth home run record in 1938. And all summer long, he chases Babe Ruth, 60 home runs. After a 2-home run game in the second half of the doubleheader on September 27th, Greenberg entered the final 5 days of the season. He wants to, with 2 to tie Babe Ruth. The pressure had been mounting, and Greenberg was physically and mentally spent. He never hit another home run that year. Now, why didn't he hit a home run? Well, if you ask his son Steve, he said he just couldn't do it. You ask some of the old-timers, and I did in the late 70s when the Mets used to have old-timers days and brought in guys from the 30s, who at that point were in their 60s and 70s, they said, we weren't going to let the Jew bastard break Babe's home run record. So does he get the pitches? Well, Steve Greenberg says, can't do it. The old-timers said, we didn't want to be remembered as the guy who gave up the home run to break Babe's record. Hitler and Greenberg. Every time Hank Greenberg ever saw a pitch after Hitler takes office, he looked at the ball and he thought Hitler was on the ball and he was going to bash the ball. That's what he was going to do. It was 1938. I'm making good money as a baseball player. No one expected war, least of all the ball players. I didn't pay too much attention to Hitler at first or any of the political going-ons at the time. I was too stupid to read the front pages, and I just went ahead and played. Of course, as time went by, I came to feel, as a Jew, hitting a home run, I was hitting one against Hitler. And World War II, you know who the first baseball player to enlist in World War II was? Hank Greenberg. After 3 months, he was in the service, and he comes out. After 3 months after he went into the service, Congress passed a law dictating that men over the age of 28 were not to be drafted. On December 5th, 1941, Sergeant Greenberg was given his discharge. He headed home to Detroit to get ready for the 1942 season. But Pearl Harbor, and anybody been out to Pearl Harbor? Well, you know that thing is still leaking. That thing is still leaking since 1941. It oozes out oil. We were in trouble, and there's only one thing to do: return to the service. I had not been called back. I'm going back of my own accord. Baseball is out the window as far as I'm concerned. I don't know if I'll ever return to baseball. Meanwhile, speaking of Hitler, speaking of Pearl Harbor, that's Avery Brundage. Avery Brundage on the left, and that's Judge Jeremiah Mahoney. Judge Jeremiah Mahoney has a little plaque in the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. And you might ask, who is Jeremiah Mahoney? Anybody know? Oh, I'm going to tell you. It's 1931, and the world community decides we need to bring Germany back into the world community after 13 years of being punished following World War I. So the International Olympic Committee awards the 1936 Summer Olympic Games to Berlin. The choice signaled Germany's return to the world community after isolation. The Nazi party leader, Adolf Hitler, becomes the Chancellor of Germany in 1933 and turns the democracy into a one-party dictatorship that persecutes Jews. Now, we're all Jewish here, right? So I'm going to dispense with everything here. Usually when I don't have an all-Jewish crowd, I have to explain everything. Other than to say the Nazis say we control all aspects of your life, including sports. German sports imagery of the 1930s promote the myth of Aryan racial superiority. Have you looked at Hitler lately? Well, not that you'd want to, but was he the ideal Aryan stereotype? No. In physical prowess? No. In sculpture and other forms, German artists idealized athletes, well-developed muscle tone, heroic strength, and accentuated, ostensibly, Aryan facial features. Oh, and there were great athletes in Germany at the time, like Erich Siegel. In 1933, April 1933, the Aryans-only policy was instituted at all German athletic organizations. The non-Jews or individuals, non-Aryans rather, or individuals with Jewish parents or the Romas or the Gypsies were thrown out of the German sports facilities and associations. The German Boxing Association expelled Erich Siegel, who was the professional light heavyweight boxing champion at the time because he was Jewish. Penn, tennis player. Ever hear of Penn? tennis player, Daniel Pren? Well, he was part of Germany's top-ranked, or he was Germany's top-ranked tennis player. He's removed from the German Davis Cup team. Why? He's Jewish. And then there's Gretel Bergman, known in this country as Margaret, now I can't think of her husband's last name. Let's talk about Margaret Lamb. Gretel Bergman, world high-class high jumper. She's expelled from her German club in 1933, but is allowed to practice and becomes Hitler's pawn. She's expelled from the team only weeks before the 1936 Olympics. That's Ernest Janke. Ernest Janke is a hero to some. He was a member of the International Olympic Committee. He was an American delegate of German ancestry. And he writes a letter to the International Olympic Committee President, Count Henri Bollé. And if you ever go through the International Olympic Committee, which I've done forever and ever and ever, you'll find there how to work counts and barons and sirs and lords and all that other stuff running the Olympics. Anyway, he's getting reports about what's going on in Hitler's Germany. On November 25th, 1935, he writes this letter to Latour. It says the Americans should boycott the 1936 Olympics. The letter: neither Americans nor the representatives of other countries can take part in the games in Nazi Germany without at least acquiescing in contempt of the Nazis for fair play and their sordid exploitation of the games. The letter seemed to go unanswered. Janke was the former Assistant Secretary of the United States Navy, German descent, and was thrown out of the International Olympic Committee by July 1936, and his spot's taken by Avery Brundage. Avery Brundage, of whom Howard Cosell once said, came of age during the time of William of Orange. December 8th, 1935, Judge Jeremiah Mahoney gives his speech that ends up being part of the Holocaust Museum in Washington. April 1933, Aryans-only policy in German organizations. Mahoney, there's no room for discrimination on grounds of race, color, or creed in the Olympics. The AAU voted in 1933 to accept an invitation to compete in Berlin in 1936, provided Germany pledged there would be no discrimination against Jewish athletes. If that pledge is not kept, I personally do not see why we should compete. Franklin Roosevelt's on the sidelines. Doesn't say a word. Privately, he tells the Olympic Committee, go ahead and participate. But that's about it. No bully pulpit. For the first time in the history of the modern Olympic Games, people in the United States and Europe called for a boycott of the Olympics because of what would later be known as human rights abuses. Well, there are Jews that are going to the Games, and Avery Brundage had assurances from the Fuhrer everything would be fine. Avery Brundage was also doing construction and had to deal with the Nazis to put up office buildings in Washington, D.C., because the Americans had not broken off diplomatic relations by that point. In August 1936, the Nazi regime did attempt to camouflage its violent racist policies while hosting the Summer Olympics. I did this talk 8 years ago up in Stamford, Connecticut, at the JCC. And there was a guy about 90 years old who was sitting in the back of the room. And he said, my parents threw me out of Germany. I was 13. They sent me to London. My father was a newspaper editor. And he said, they wanted me out. And I had relatives in London, and I went. But I used to see them every summer. And I would go through Berlin. And my parents moved to what is now Czechoslovakia, Prague. He was a newspaper editor there. I didn't ask him what happened to his parents. He said, going into Berlin, it was fun. Coming back through Berlin after the Olympics, it was, again, dirty Jew and all that other stuff. He spit upon and all that. All an illusion. The Berlin Games presented to foreign spectators and journalists with a false image of peaceful, tolerant Germany. Germany got its propaganda coup. 49 nations sent their delegations to the Games, and that legitimized Hitler. And also, television is really developed in Germany. Why? They want to show the games, area superiority, and they are pushing and pushing and pushing TV, and the first commercial stations are on in Germany in 1935. It was for propaganda purposes, but TV didn't work. Hey, look, you know, we're cool, we're cool. Jesse Owens would steal the Olympics, win all those gold medals. Except he shouldn't have done that. Should have been Marty and Sam. During the 1936 Olympics, television, 8 hours a day in Berlin and Hamburg. And there's Marty, and there's Sam. A lot of you probably know Marty from being the New York Giants announcer, or the New York Knicks announcer, right? Fastest guy in Brooklyn. Fastest guy in Brooklyn. Sam is 3 years old, more reserved, far more reserved. Marty would talk until, I don't know, until you were blue in the face. Sam was a really quiet guy, really, really quiet guy. And they're preparing for the 1936 Olympics because, as Marty said, I wanted to win that gold medal. I was going to shove it right in the bastard's face, showing him that this Jew from Brooklyn is better than you. Never got the opportunity. The day before the event, Sam and Jesse, Sam and Marty were replaced by Jesse Owens and Ralph Metcalf, the two fastest sprinters. The coaches claimed that they needed the fastest runners to win the race. Except there's a little fly in that ointment. Jesse never ran a relay race. He did not know how to take the baton or hand off the baton, which means he could have dropped the baton and sabotaged the whole team, which is what they may have been after. Lippmann said the day before, Dean Cromwell and Avery Brundage were motivated by anti-Semitism and the desire to spare the Fuhrer the embarrassment of seeing two American New York Jews on the winning podium. Sam never thought it was an anti-Semitic thing. Marty, on the other hand, did. Sam said, though, it was the most humiliating episode in his life. Marty had no problems. Hi, Marty, how you doing? May that Avery Brundage rot in hell for the rest of eternity. No problem at all. This is Marty. We were shocked. Sam was completely stunned. He didn't say a word in the meeting. I was a brash 18-year-old kid, fastest kid in Brooklyn, and I said, Coach, you can't hide world-class sprinters. At which point Jesse spoke up and Coach said, Coach, I've won my 3 medals, 100, 200, and the long jump. I'm tired. I've had it. Let Marty and Sam run. They deserve it. Cromwell pointed his finger at Jesse. You do as you're told. And in those days, black athletes did do what they were told. And Jesse was quiet after that. After all, America, Jim Crow, and oh, by the way, Jesse didn't have a job for 10 years or so after winning those gold medals. Never had a job of any substance. So Draper and Wyckoff stayed, replaced by, yes?
Just to say, add a little anecdote to that. Around 5 years ago,
Yeah.
I had the opportunity to go to the Jesse Owens Museum down in Alabama, and there was no mention of the anti-Semitism involved in that. And I asked the director of the museum, he said that was under the direction of the Owens family. They didn't want it included.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, he did talk about it. Somewhat.
They missed a teaching moment.
Yeah, somewhat. 2 weeks before the games began, oh, so Marty, Jesse wins the medals. But Gretel Bergman, Martha Lambert, are you familiar with her? You are. Okay. Great, great athlete. Great, great athlete. German officials told Gretel Bergman, no, you're not making the team. She had equaled the Germans' women's record in the high jump. The Germans sacrificed the chance for a gold medal with that action. And there was Gretel. In 1993, I interviewed Gretel Bergman at the New York Athletic Club, me, Marv Schneider, and Gretel Bergman. And knowing the history of the New York Athletic Club, I said to Martha Lambert, her real name was Martha, and she married Dr. Bruno Lambert. I said, years ago, the 3 of us couldn't be standing here. She said, I'd rather be standing here than back there. Anyway, this is her interview with me. It starts out. I ask her, the interview process starts, it's me, it's Marv, and it's Martha, Margaret. And I said to her, I just have a one-word question. Why? Her answer was, I was the great Jewish hope. And she was. She said to me, we were losing all of our rights, everything. We lost our business, our place to live. We were losing everything. We were treated so poorly, and yet here I was. And I wanted to just give my people just one ray of hope. One ray of hope. That's all I wanted to do. Turned out she's just another Jew in Germany. 1937, Gretel Bergman and her husband, or future husband, Dr. Bruno Lambert, who met athletes, were able to obtain papers. The papers allowed her to emigrate to the United States. She landed in New York City with no more than $10 in her pocket, because that's all the Germans would give you. And she worked, she had some sponsors in Forest Hills. She worked as a masseuse, a housemaid, and later a therapist. She married Dr. Bruno Lambert and went on to her life in the United States and died at the age of 107 in 2017. She continued to participate in sports in the United States in 1937 and 1938. She was the women's high jump champion and the shot put champion. She married Dr. Bruno Lambert in 1938. She became a citizen in 1942 and faded into obscurity. Until 1980, when she was inducted into the Jewish Hall of Fame at the Wingate Institute in Israel, 1980, and all of a sudden, there was a renaissance. Let's look into Gretel Bergman and why she was so great. Her legacy, the International Olympic Committee gave her a gold medal in 1996, knowing she would have won gold medals at the 1936 Olympics. Now, HBO, Fuchs over at HBO and Levinson, Russ Levinson, we're after her. We want to do your story. We want to do your story. And she said, no, I'm not going back to Germany. But we want to do your story. We want to do your story. Please, let's go back to Germany. And eventually she gave in. By the way, she was 103, not 107. But it was great, right? Fuchs and Levinson got her to go back in 1999. And she found out she had a stadium named after her in Latham where she used to train. And I don't know if she ever bought a Ford or a Mercedes-Benz, because she said she was never going to buy a Ford or a Mercedes-Benz. The HBO special came out in 2004. Get it. It's good. It's called Hitler's Pawn, P-A-W-A. HBO did two specials. One called Hitler's Pawn, about her, and one called Glickman. Both of them are worth seeing. Both of them. And she died in 2017. Oh, there was a Jewish athlete that did perform for the Germans. Her name was Helene Meyer. Her father was Jewish. Her mother wasn't. And there she is giving the Heil Hitler salute. German authorities allowed Helene Meyer to represent Germany at the Olympics in Berlin. She was viewed as a non-Aryan because her father was Jewish. She won a silver medal in the women's individual fencing. And like all the other medalists for Germany, she gave the Nazi salute on the podium. No other Jews competed for Germany in the Summer Games. She fled to California eventually. She died pretty young, at the age of 42, and did not leave any correspondence. There were no film clips of her talking about the time. She never wrote a book. In 2000, when Sports Illustrated was a legitimate magazine, it's not now, they named her the greatest fencer of the 20th century. The only thing that somebody once said about her was she gave the salute because she had relatives in Germany that she was afraid something might happen to them. But that's never been confirmed. This is somebody just said something about her. Oh, the games itself, there he is, the Aryan stereotype. And there's Jesse Owens. Adolf Hitler hoped that the 1936 Berlin Games would prove his theory of Aryan racial superiority was true. Owens won 4 gold medals. He set 3 world records, and one of them replacing Marty Glickman in the 4x100 relay. 9 athletes who were Jewish or of Jewish parentage. 1 medals at those Olympics, including Meyer and 5 Hungarians. Several Jewish male athletes from the United States did go to Berlin, in addition to Marty and Sam. Like some of the European competitors at the Olympics, many of these young men were pressured by Jewish organizers to boycott the games. Marty said, I had to go because I was going to shove it right up the Fuhrer's you-know-what. Roman Cantor was a Polish fencer, died in a concentration camp. Many Jewish athletes who did compete in the Olympics prior to 1936, or the 36 Olympics, died in concentration camps in the Holocaust. Among them, Ija Zebrin, a Polish swimmer, Cantor, the Polish fencer, both competed in 36 and would later die in Majdanek. And the two films or the documentaries, I highly recommend them. Bergman, Hitler's Pawn, and Glickman, if you can find them. Oh, this guy. This guy ran the Olympic Village for Hitler, and he commits suicide 3 days later. Wolfgang Fürstner. He was the vice commander of the Berlin Olympics Village, and he commits suicide on the 19th of August, 1936, 3 days after the games, and he was worried they were going to find out he had Jewish blood in him. Chamberlain's appeasement. Yeah, let's appease Hitler. Okay. The 1940 Olympics, Sapporo was the original choice for those games, but there was the Sino-Japanese War, so you couldn't go to Sapporo. So the International Olympic Committee is looking for another city for 1940. They go to St. Moritz, they say no. They have the 28 Olympics. On June 9th, 1939, the International Olympic Committee gives the games to Germany near the site of the 1936 Winter Games in Munich. By that point, Germany had invaded Austria. It was 7 months after Kristallnacht, less than 3 months after German troops took bits of Czechoslovakia. Hey, why not? Let's go to Germany. We're the International Olympic Committee. Oh, also, there's Benito Mussolini. 1944, the IOC gave the Olympic Games to Cortino d'Ampezzo in Mussolini's Italy. None of those games ever took place. Germany invaded Poland in 1939. Marty, Sam, Gretel, no Olympics in 40 or 44, and by 48 they're too old to compete. Mo Berg of Newark, New Jersey. You've heard of Mo Berg, right? Catcher was a spy and all that. Aviva's last foray into baseball was about Mo Berg. 1934, Mo Berg, Goodwill, he's on the Goodwill baseball tour, Japan with Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig. He puts on a kimono, goes to the roof of the tallest building, used a movie camera to film shipyards, industrial complexes, and military installations. There is Mo Berg. The catcher was a spy. He was part of the OSS. Some of those films used years later for bombing. He joined the Office of Strategic Services, a forerunner to the CIA in 1942. 1944, he gets an assignment. Gather information about progress made on the atomic bomb by Germany. Berg through Italy, England, Algeria, and Yugoslavia, masks a raid as a Nazi officer to get to a munitions plant. He concluded Germany was not close to an atomic bomb. This guy, Alfred Nekichi from France, he competed in 1936 Olympics. He came in fourth as part of the 4x200-meter relay, missing a bronze medal by 6 seconds. 1941 set a world record for the 200-meter breaststroke, beating the German champion along the way. He's a Jewish swimmer. He attracted criticism and restricted from entering races. He got solidarity from many of France's leading swimmers. They protested at his treatment. But he gets transported to Auschwitz, January 1944. He, his wife, and 2-year-old daughter sent to the concentration camp. Of 1,368 men, women, and children who made that journey, only 47 survived. His wife and daughter died. But after being released, he's back swimming. In 1946, he's part of a French team that won the world's record in the 3x100 relay, and he became the French national champion at the butterfly in the 4x100 relay, and he gets to the 1948 Olympics. In London, he swims the 200-meter breaststroke, reaching the semifinals, and he was also part of France's water polo team. The Munich 11. In fact, I just watched the What's My Line with Jesse Owens. that happened right after this. Jesse was very, very upset about what happened at the '72 Olympics. It was on Buzzard TV, and Jesse was talking about that. 9 athletes, 2 coaches are killed. The massacre, first time that terrorism comes into your home. Did you ever see terrorism before that? No. But it comes in. You're watching ABC, and you're watching Jim McKay, who does a marvelous job of anchoring what's going on, and Howard Cosell complained about it, saying that I should have been there. After all, what Jim McKay know about being chased by the Irish kids down Easton Parkway? Howard, you're 6'3". You are a Marine sergeant. You're a tough guy. Well, back in those days, I was chased by... I could go on and on. I know Howard's grandkids rather well. And for some reason, he liked me. Anyway, the attack, the Day of Terror. It's September 5th, 1972, 4:30 in the morning. 8 Palestinian militants affiliated with Black September, the group that tried to assassinate King Hussein twice in Jordan in 1970. He got kicked out of Jordan in 1971. It's a military offshoot of the Palestinian group Fatah. They scale an Olympic fence at the village in Munich. They're disguised as athletes using stolen keys, force their way into the quarters of the Israeli Olympic team. And 10 o'clock, the German officials think that they have reached a settlement with the terrorists. Terrorists get out. They lead their bound and blindfolded hostages from their quarters into a bus. They're going to a German Air Force base. And there is Jim McKay, who did my business. He did a great job that day. He did a wonderful job that day. At 3 o'clock in the morning, McKay said, been on for 14 straight hours. He ends his broadcast, they're all gone. German authorities never did storm Building 31. They allowed the terrorists to take hostages by helicopter to a nearby Air Force base. There, the Germans planned an ambush and rescue attempt. It was badly bungled. 9 of the hostages killed by a combination of terrorist gunfire and a hand grenade that Palestinians set off from the helicopter. By 12:30 on September 6th, the shooting had stopped. The 20-hour reign of terror was over. 11 Israelis killed, along with 1 Munich policeman. 5 Black September terrorists lay dead. 3 the gunmen captured. And there's Howard. Howard was part of the Olympic coverage. One of his one of his better lines was, "We have an immense flurry of action here." Cosell tells Peter Jennings, "Police in platoon-like numbers are staging in front of us." Yeah, they staged right in front of you, Howard, because they wanted you to see it. Richard Nixon, who settled the 1985 Major League Baseball umpires dispute. That's where I got to know him. "Oh, please call me Dick." He's upset. He's the most powerful person in the world. He's upset. He sends a telegram to Avery Brundage. "Games must be called off." And Brundage, just the President of the United States, I head the International Olympic Committee. "The games must go on." At a memorial service on September 6th, Brundage announced the games would continue. Oh, by the way, prior to the Munich Olympics, Brundage recalled that the 1936 Hitler Games was the finest ever. Mark Spitz, 1999, I did an interview with him at the Helmsley, Helmsley Palace, whatever they called it. Anyway, for some reason he's there and I'm interviewing him. So this is him talking, not me, this is him talking. He had won 7 medals, and he's taken out of Munich to London because there was a fear that he was going to be a terrorist target. This is him, not me. The swimming program had stopped, he told me during this interview. "I swam all my events that evening. The last day of competition was on Monday. This happened on the Tuesday morning. Swimming was through, so I didn't have to compete anymore. Had a press conference right afterwards on Tuesday, and that's when everyone told me about this Israeli tragedy or the thing that was happening at the time. Hadn't turned into a major tragedy at the moment, at least at that time. They didn't know much about it. The next day, I was whisked away." Oh, as far as Brundage, 27 words about our Israeli friends. The games resumed within 34 hours. And I was in Delft in the Netherlands, and I decided, hey, look at that. I'm going to send this to Justin Cosell, Howard's grandkid. Look at that, William of Orange, right in the middle of Netherlands. Hey, that's perfect, because the joke was Avery Brundage became of age during the time of William von Orange. That was Cosell's joke. No memorial for the Israeli team, 1976. The team entered the stadium with a black ribbon or a national flag. There was no acknowledgement, and in 2022, 40 years afterwards, no mention of the 40th anniversary. At last, in 2016, the IOC did recognize everybody who was killed at the Olympics, the 11 athletes and coaches, plus one poor guy who got killed during a warm-up for the luge in Vancouver. One of the widows said that it brought closure for the family, and there's Bach signing the order, the International Olympic Committee, President Thomas Bach. Germany has never held another Olympics. I'm going to make this, because I've kept you here too long, I'm just going to go through a bunch of guys, boxing and basketball. Benny Leonard, greatest light heavyweights of all time. The stock market crash killed his investment, so he comes back in 1931, wins 18 in a row, and then gets beaten by Jimmy McLaurin in this last fight. Daniel Medoza was the first Jewish boxing champion. 1792 to 1795, he was Sephardic, and he was bright. This is what they say. He was intelligent, communicative, a master of ring strategy and defense, several rungs above his contemporaries. In other words, he had brains, right? He also was a writer. His memories were written probably in 1808. And it's a vital document to understanding Jewish assimilation into the English culture. Barney Ross was another fighter. He won some championships in the lightweight, junior, welterweight, and welterweight championships. Dolph Shays, who I've done extensive interviews with, he was with the Syracuse Nats. Hey, how many of you know about the South Philadelphia Hebrew Association? Bunch of guys in Philadelphia get together and play basketball, right? Become one of the greatest basketball teams of all time, and they came out of Hawaii, so to speak. Jews did rule basketball. Paul Gallico was a writer with the New York Daily News. He would go on and write Pride of the Yankees screenplay, write the book Poseidon Adventure and other books. He was the Daily News sports editor in 1937. And he wrote this: basketball appears to the Hebrew with his Oriental background. I didn't know that Hebrews had Oriental backgrounds. But because the game places a premium on alert, scheming mind and flashy trickedness, artful dodging, and general smart aleckness. Claire B. was one of the guys who kind of invented strategy in basketball, as did Nat Holman. And the Big Cigar, Red Auerbach was, as Pat Riley used to call him, the Big Cigar, was a great coach in the NBA. And there was Holtzman of Brooklyn, Red Holtzman of Brooklyn, who once told me, never go to a bald barber because he has no respect for hair. The first points ever in the NBA were by Ozzie Sheckman, Knicks against Toronto back in 1946. Ozzie Sheckman. It was a game that the Knicks ended up winning 68-66. Matt Zalowski, the early days were loaded with Jews. Today, women's best basketball player may have been Sue Bird, who's Jewish. And look at that motley crew. Len Berman, Warner Wolf, a couple fighters in there, Art Shamsky. We were doing a fundraiser for Jewish charity back in 2007. Football, Sid Luckman and Benny Friedman. That's Benny Friedman. When he turned pro, the college sensation was greeted with fanfare by the media, only exceeded by Red Grange. He could run, kick, and pass the ball. He played in Detroit. And Tim Merritt, the Giants manager, Giants owner, hey, he was out there with John Jay Mcgraw. I need a big Jewish guy to sell tickets. And he bought the entire Detroit franchise, moved him to New York because of Benny Friedman. Sid Luckman was with the Chicago Bears. He won 4 championships with the Bears. He was a Jewish role model on the level of Greenberg and Koufax, and he's still there. He's still there in the city of Chicago in terms of legendary people. And Sid Gilman, father of the modern offense in football. Ellie Sherman, New York Giants fans? Yeah. Goodbye, Allie. Allie coached the Giants, but he was a great TV executive. Bill Walsh based his San Francisco 49ers West Coast offense with Ellie Sherman's 1961 through 63 offense. Greasy Neal, the coach of the Eagles. Never have I seen a player with greater understanding of the game. Smart guy, smart guy. Ron Mix, Football Hall of Famer, also a lawyer. Marshall Goldberg became a justice. And Julian Edelman was stunning for his bar mitzvah lessons. Swimmers, Mark Spitz, you had Dana Torres in the Olympics. She was in Olympics, 6 Olympics. She won 12 medals. Her father was Jewish, her mother wasn't. She converted to Judaism after she married her second husband, an Israeli doctor. Dick Sabat was a great tennis player. Amy Alcott, great golf player. And Sandy, of course. And as Casey Stengel once said, you can forget about the other guy, Walter Johnson. You can forget about Rue Wadwell. The Jewish kid is probably the best of them all. Koufax, I want to enjoy this while it lasts. The end can come at any day. I have an obligation to kids. I often thought, which comes first, success or confidence? I never figured it out. A pitcher can get by with only one pitch, the fastball, if he has control. It's too good a life. When will it end? The hitters will let me know. Actually, his elbow did. It was gone by the age of 30. And we leave with Yom Kippur, 1965, and Don Drysdale and Walter Alston. Now, you know the whole story about Sandy not pitching against the Minnesota Twins in the 1965 World Series, which is legendary. It's October 6, 1965, Game 1 of the 1965 World Series, which coincides with Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. The Commissioner's Office determined the World Series days on September 8th, and the Dodgers weren't even in first place, and baseball really didn't care about playing on Yom Kippur. It wasn't the Brooklyn Dodgers anymore. From what I've been told, there are no dispensations for this particular date. Koufax tells the Associated Press on October 1st, but then I haven't really talked about it to a rabbi. If we saw it dependent, I plan to take it up and find out the proceedings. If I'm told it isn't proper to pitch, then I won't, because I won't feel right about it. According to Milty Richmond, UPI, Koufax made up his mind on choosing religion over World Series in 1959, when the championship coincided with Rosh Hashanah. He did not attend the workouts at the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum, nor did he pitch Game 4. A man is entitled to his belief, and I believe I should not work on Yom Kippur. Sandy was not a religious guy. It's simple as that. And I've never had any trouble on that account since I've been in baseball. 1959, Koufax requested to skip his start on April 22nd, being the first night of Passover. Similarly, 1961 and 63, he skipped his turn in the rotation, which conflicted with Rosh Hashanah. Teammate Larry Sherry, also Jewish, is believed to have sat out the holiday in 1961, along with Norm Sherry, who was with the Dodgers that year, Larry's brother. Game 7 of the World Series. Each pitching on 2 days rest. Koufax and the Twins, Jim Cott go head-to-head. 2 runs in the 3rd inning give the Dodgers all they need. They win the game 2-0. Koufax earned his 2nd World Series MVP. As far as Drysdale taking Koufax's place in Game 1, he gets lit up by the Twins. And Walter Alston comes out to the mound to take him out of the game. And Drysdale, who I knew, who had a really good sense of humor, he looks at Walt Alston, gives him the ball, and he says, "I bet you wish I was Jewish today." Thank you so much. Any questions, any comments?
Very interesting.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions or comments?